This project is actually a project that Francisco, the chair, has also been involved in, but he's asked me to do all the talking. I'll give you a bit of background about the project. We're coming to the end of a 2-year project. We've done quite a lot of testing, so we have some results. So at the end I'll give you some of the results and where we go next. Maybe not use this. So just a brief background. The project is funded by the European Commission, part funded by the European Commission, and the 7th Framework Programme in the area of e-inclusion and marginalised young people. The consortium has 7 partners from Spain, Romania and the UK, 3 SMEs, a university and 3 test centres. There's a test centre in Spain and in Romania, and a voluntary test centre in London in the UK. So the aim of the project, we wanted to create a highly immersive game that could help address the reintegration of young people who become marginalised due to their behaviour. We wanted to develop a tool that would support experts and others involved in programmes of rehabilitation and programmes addressing behavioural problems in young people. And that includes supporting teachers. There are different application domains for this. One would be a school, but one would also be a centre for young people or so on. So there are various different places that this could work. The game itself, we wanted to try and create something that developed a much greater awareness in the player of why they behave in the way they do, and also get them to think about the consequences of their actions. And I'll say a little bit more about the specific objectives of the game a bit later on. And from a kind of an expert perspective, we wanted to create a game that was very, very playable and very immersive, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but also a game that was built around very strong pedagogical thinking. Something that the experts, the teachers and so on working in this field would really take seriously and believe had real value. And at the end there, the last thing, we actually didn't particularly set out to change behaviour through the playing of the game. We felt initially that was perhaps a little ambitious or unrealistic. Interestingly enough, through our testing, we've started to see that actually there has been some behavioural change. So again, I'll come back to that in a moment. Child-centric context for discussion and interaction. A lot of the ways in which the interaction between young people who have behavioural problems and people who are trying to help them is a more kind of adult-centric kind of context. Mainly talking-based therapies. You sit in a room opposite each other and the teacher or the expert asks some questions and has a clipboard and the young person answers. That's not a very child-friendly dynamic. So we wanted to create a child-centric context. Using gaming technology as a mechanism for engagement. I mean, you probably all don't need to be told how popular games tend to be these days amongst young people. Almost universal popularity. So games are obviously a very easy way of reaching out to young people and connecting with them. We were very clear that we wanted to create a very immersive, genuinely kind of convincing game experience that attempted to stand alongside the existing games that young people play. In my experience, there are educational games that when you play them and then you play like an Xbox game, there's not an awful lot of relationship between the two, and young people have a very high level of game literacy these days. So their expectations of a game, of a video game, are very, very high, and we wanted to try and create an environment that was meeting at least some of those expectations. And then within that, we wanted to embed this pedagogically driven content. So we had the 2 things going on. We had the highly playable, highly immersive game and the high value content within that context. And then the idea with Replay, why we're calling the project Replay, is that there was a built-in feedback session into the game kind of process. And again, I'll explain how that works in a moment. And then within the project, we wanted to try and analyse the impact. The project hasn't allowed us to do a long-term study of the impact of the game on behaviour, but we have done a lot of short-term work with, I think, around 70 or 80 kids, children, and 30 or 40 experts or something. So we've had from 3 countries, we've had quite a lot of testing, so we can give some feedback on how effective initially the game is. So the game design and development, this was very important. What did the children? We spoke to children. Maybe some of this stuff you could guess, but we went out and we canvassed children. We said, what are children, these young people want? The age, by the way, as we're focusing on is around 10 to 14-year-olds. I should have maybe said that. So there are various things they like. Here are some of the things that we found. That they like sports, racing games, active games, games with challenges in, first person, very popular, very high level of interaction. Obviously we're now living in the age of the Nintendo Wii and so on, so that's one kind of aspect that we were aware of. Graphics are very, very important. Highly sort of playable games. The kids we spoke to were less interested in the kind of Sims games. Obviously there are a number of different types of games and they like different types of games, but the people we spoke to were more into the kind of active playable games. To avoid boredom, and something competitive. They like the notion of competitiveness. Now we took on board all of these things. We weren't able to get all of these elements into our game because we're a 2-year project and we don't have millions of dollars or euros. But we tried to do a lot of this. Multiplayer, for example, was not possible within the context of our game because the game is designed to be played between a single young person and an expert, and the interaction between those two is actually highly personal. So the game itself does not allow for multiplayer. It's not a multiplayer type game. We could have developed it in that way, but the context doesn't allow it. And then in terms of the content and the focus of the content and how we generated the content, again, we spoke to teachers, we spoke to people that worked in youth justice, we spoke to people that work with children with behavioural problems. So one of the key things, and this is what Replay does, one of the key things is to provide a stimulus for discussion and engagement. There was an interest to take some of the types of assessment tools and talking tools, some of which have been very, very highly developed, but to try and integrate some of those techniques into a game context. So we weren't trying to reinvent the way in which you necessarily understand issues, but we were trying to create a different context for understanding those issues. We decided through our discussions to address what we describe as low-level types of antisocial behaviour. Another way of describing it would be the early indicators. So there's a lot of thinking at the moment around the idea that it's better to actually to try and address antisocial behaviour at a younger age before it becomes more serious antisocial behaviour leading on to criminal behaviour. So our age group is a slightly younger age group, 10 to 14, and we're looking at less serious types of behaviour. We're not looking at physical violence and so on, we're looking at the lower level types of behaviours. And as we're saying, I kind of create a new approach for sort of reaching out to these children. Again, the thinking now, certainly I think in sort of much of Europe and